Good afternoon and welcome once again to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. We are coming to you live from the studios of the American Guns and Glory Network here in Las Vegas, Nevada. This show, as regular listeners know, is all about guns, related political issues, and self-defense issues. Fired Up with Bob Irwin is on YouTube with a new show every Thursday, generally around 5 p.m. We'll put it up on the air on our website and on YouTube, at least for the moment it's on YouTube. And it stays up there forever. So if I say something that turns out to be really foolish 3 years later, you can look back at the old shows at any time you want and see what I said that was totally wrong. The audio feed is rebroadcast for radio listeners Saturdays at noon on the Nevada Talk Network, which comprises now about 10 stations across the state of Nevada. It is run simultaneously on all those stations. To check out a list for the locality where you are, you can go to www.kely1230.com for the stations in your area. Their main station is in Ely, but it simulcasts on all their other stations at the same time through repeaters. If you have a question or comment, you can email me at bob@firedupmail.com. That'll be on the crawl at the bottom of the broadcast here. Or leave a message on my office recorder, which is area code 702-257-1060. If you leave contact information, I do answer everybody who inquires either by email or text or telephone. Questions directed to my guests can be sent to that same website or that same email address, and I will forward it to those who you are talking to. If you have a question from a guest, just send it to me, or the guest will probably give you his direct contact information during the show. So, there are several hundred defensive uses of firearms in the United States every week. They're rarely covered by the mainstream media. So we usually present a few. In this case, we're only going to do one on this particular show, which I'll explain in a moment. They are there for the listeners' edification and education, not to berate or look at what the guy did right or wrong, but to let the listeners put themselves in the position he was in and look at what he did right, what he did wrong. Usually we have an attorney on, as we do today, to discuss how he could have made it better. But bear in mind that we are dealing here on this show generally with Nevada law. The rules for engagement, for shooting, for self-defense vary from state to state, county to county, and either smaller jurisdictions, some cities have particular restrictions. So if you are actually involved in a shooting or being sued over a shooting, we strongly recommend that you contact a local criminal defense lawyer. If you can't find one in your area, call me or send me a text and I will direct you to what I believe is a competent attorney in that jurisdiction. Local law prevails. It's pretty obvious what is a good shooting in Nevada may not be a good shooting in New York City, surprise, and vice versa. So it always applies to the rules where you are. Our advice is intended to keep you safe so you can defend yourself, keep you out of jail, and prevent losing everything you own in a civil lawsuit after the event is over. Now, that being said, my long-winded opening, today's guest is a local attorney and judicial candidate, James Dean Leavitt. Welcome to the show, James Dean.
Bob, thanks for having me on a very warm Thursday afternoon.
It's a beautiful day here in Las Vegas. For those of you listening to this from other states, and we go all over the world on the internet, obviously. So it's going to be about 95 today for all of you freezing in New York City with the rainstorms. Ha. So, Jim, if I could get you to do a little bit of your background.
I predominantly focused on criminal defense the first 10 years of my practice. In 2004, after I'd made a little bit of money and got my feet wet, I decided it was time for me to give back. I ran and was elected to the Nevada Board of Regents, and I served a 6-year term from 2004 to 2010. I then chose to run again, and again was elected and served from 2010 to 2012. 2016. The board was an extraordinary experience, giving back to the community. Like all public service, I received much more than I ever gave. We have colleges, a lot of people don't know, but they associate the Board of Regents with UNLV. But we have CSN, we have the Desert Research Institute, we have Truckee Meadows Community College in Reno, we have UNR, of course. We've got Great Basin College in Elko, and we have Western Nevada College in Carson City. So it took me all over the state, but at the end of the day, you're working with students, and there's nothing more inspiring than seeing folks, many of whom are first generation, because the difference between us and them is really educational opportunity. And my father grew up in a very poor farming family in the Depression, was born in 1928. He somehow, as the oldest, was able to survive that, make his way to medical school, where he was first in his class. And so that legacy is something, I lost him about 3 weeks ago. He was just 2 weeks shy of his 90th birthday. And so, we had a great celebration of life for him a couple of weeks ago. So look, I've had this incredible opportunity to do civil law, to do criminal law. Now I'm moving into what I call the next phase of my life. I don't think it'll be the last phase. It's the next phase. And after 25 years of practicing, I've decided to run for justice court. I think that's the place where you can make the most difference. You see the most number of people, and frankly, to be able to inspire the folks that find themselves in our criminal justice system, to help inspire them, to help to help guide them, to show them another way. And that's what really has me motivated. I was a missionary 37 years ago as a 19-year-old, and I've said this for a long time, that for young men, you should either serve a mission, you should go into the Peace Corps, or you should perform military service. And I believe that. Young men need to grow up, and we're too soft today on young men. Young men need direction, and they need hopes and dreams, but they need discipline more than anything else.
It's quite common when you see the young men that are involved in a life of crime, they have never done any of those three things.
They haven't done those things, and they don't know how extraordinary they are, because maybe they weren't told, right?
I want to get into, as I say, we're going to do one case today. I'm going to put him on the spot as a judge here. So this is from the Denver Post, also carried by CBS News on the 16th of March in Aurora, Colorado. Police said the owner of a grocery store was shot Friday during a robbery by a man who was later shot by a Good Samaritan who came to the store owner's aid. Around just after 2 in the afternoon, Aurora police arrived at a place called the Village East Grocery Store in the 1100 block of Peoria Street. They found a woman believed to be the store owner injured with a gunshot wound in the parking lot. She was taken to the hospital where she's in serious but turned out stable condition. Another person whom the police referred to as a Good Samaritan reportedly confronted the robber outside the grocery store and shot the robber, who then fled the area. Police found a wounded male nearby on South Joliet and East Garden Drive. It's a half mile away. Believing the man who was shot, believing him to be the guy who shot the grocery store owner, police took him into custody and brought him to the hospital to treat his injuries. The robbery and shooting are still being investigated. Police are asking for help. If you have any information, to contact the Aurora Police Department. I like this case because it brings up a lot of issues. It's always heroic, but it's really risky to intervene in, especially with deadly force, in a situation where you're not the victim and you don't really know who's who. This appears to be a clean-cut defense of others case if we presume it was a robbery, as the police are presuming, rather than a domestic incident or maybe an accident of some sort. You don't know who's who. This appears, as I said, to be a good shooting, but the advice is, this is where, when I always talk about giving warnings, this is where the warning thing really matters. We don't have anything in the police reports that this Good Samaritan gave him a warning, yelled, dropped a gun or whatever. But right off the bat, you can see if that would have made a huge difference in his decision-making, whether to fire. This is your client. What do you think, Judge?
Yeah, so first of all, we're using the word Good Samaritan. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, but let's go with he was a Good Samaritan. And so under Nevada law, of course, you can defend yourself, but you can also defend others. That's not true in every other state, and thanks for pointing out to your listeners that you better know the law in the jurisdiction that you live in. If you move here...
This was in New York City,
look,
the guy'd be in jail already.
Well, look,
So-
he may have already been convicted in New York City, but let's be honest, right? But this points out the obvious. You have to know the law in the jurisdiction that you live. And if you're going to... the Second Amendment carries these incredible rights, but it also carries incredible responsibilities. Because here you have an individual, and this Good Samaritan, we don't know if he's black or white, we don't know if he's rich or poor, we don't know if he's a doctor, we don't know if he's a drug dealer, we don't know anything about this guy. But he thinks that he is stopping a robbery. And so his state of mind, of course, is relevant, but relevant to who? Relevant to the investigator, relevant to the district attorney, relevant to the judge, and who's focusing? Right? And then again, this case has more questions, of course, than it has answers. And where did he shoot him? Did he shoot him in the back 6 times? Did he shoot him in the knee? Wants to incapacitate him? We don't know these questions. But I think what it comes down to, more than anything else, and when someone comes in my office, and they often do, and they ask me, what can I do? What can't I do? I tell every one of them, the best thing in your life would be that you never have to use that firearm that you earned the right to carry a concealed permit with. You don't want to have to ever. An officer does not ever want to have to use that weapon that he's trained to use. So here this guy's in a situation, someone is leaving a store, someone is a presumed robbery suspect, and yet now this person decides to use force against another. Was it lethal? Was it justified? What were the facts? What were the circumstances? But for me, know the law, but more importantly, don't use a firearm unless you're properly trained to use it.
That's why I so harp with people on using warnings, and I realize that it almost gives the bad guy opportunity to make the first shot, but it clearly will tell you in almost all cases what's going on.
For sure.
He's going to come up with his gun. He's going to yell, "I'm a police officer." Something
perhaps
that may give you a clue.
Assuming they're not deaf, and they may be. Think about that.
And
once in a while, deaf people get involved. It's rare, but it happens.
Commit crimes. I've seen those cases. This is just a picture-perfect example, and we don't know all the details, which is what makes it more difficult. You have to look at all the options, but as Jim just explained, there's so many things going on here that he didn't know. It looks like he's fine. Looks like. They'll know when the details come out, but that's why I use this case, because we don't have all the answers to put our judge on the spot here.
No, look, it's a great hypothetical, and I think, it's a great case for law students, it's a great case for lawyers, it's a great case for...
What I'll do normally, as regular listeners know, as I get more information on this, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, when there is actually police reports that I can read and so forth, we may have a lot more details, and it may turn out to be a perfect shooting, and it may turn out to be he shot the mayor's son, who was not the suspect. He just kind of looked like the guy. And
you might even invite me to come back and speculate further on this case with some facts.
And we're only going to do the one case because while we're here, I really want to go on to something else. I know we talked about it on the phone. I saw some reference to it in your campaign flyer, which is the time it takes to get a decision made in court. I have a client now who is charged with open murder with what appears to be an accidental shooting. And there's a lot of evidence to that, and I don't want to try the case because I got to try the case for real in about 2 weeks, but so I don't want to go into any more detail on it. But he has been sitting in jail now for over 2 years on $1 million bail, open murder. It looks like we've got a pretty good case to make that there was an accidental shooting, that the gun actually malfunctioned, which is why I'm involved in the case. And it takes so long to get somebody into the system. One of the things that struck me about your campaign literature was you will make decisions in a timely manner so people can go on with their lives.
Yeah, Bob, look, I appreciate the question. And, there's an old axiom, and we hear it often, but we hear it often because it matters. And it's the axiom that justice delayed is justice denied.
Yeah.
Now, when you are in custody and you can't afford $1 million bail, and who can? Who can, right? That's less than 1% of the population.
Bill Cosby. Actually.
Bill Cosby, and not too many others, right? And maybe not anymore. But think about that, right? So here you have a person, we've got this presumption of innocence, and yet based on the facts that you're describing, and I don't know the details of the case you're referencing, but here we have a judge that set bail in an amount. Why even set bail if it's that prohibitive? The only purpose, bail is not supposed to be pretrial incarceration. We're supposed to have the presumption of innocence in this country, and the only purpose of bail is to ensure a reasonable likelihood that the individual will appear at trial.
Sure.
If you want to ensure safety of the public, put someone on house arrest, monitor them, allow them to go to and from work, right? I mean, there's a presumption. And now look, if this is the clearest of cases, and what you're describing, it's not the clearest of cases. There could have been a gun. There could have been a gunman.
A lot
I
of
understand.
complications in it.
And when there's complications, the bail should reflect that. And if there's a tie, just like in baseball, ties go to the runner. If you're in the Las Vegas Justice Court Department 1 next year, the ties are going to go to the defendant every single time because of the presumption of innocence. They don't go to the prosecution, they go to the defendant. And just like in baseball, they go to the runner.
That's solves the problem. I was just impressed by that statement because that was in your literature. And it's not going to be true in every case, and every case is different. I deal primarily with shooting cases, as everybody knows, and no two have ever been the same. There's different distances, different who's who, height, weight, background, what they saw, what they didn't see, day or night, so they're all different cases and they all stand on their own merit. We can get some idea of where it should go from previous cases that are similar, but there've never been two that are the same.
There's never been two the same, and I apologize for interrupting, but one of the hallmarks of the American criminal justice system is that under the United States Supreme Court, there is a concept called individualized sentencing. So, and that's exactly what you're talking about. No one gets sentenced the same because the facts are never the same. And as much as our legislature tries to put judges in a box to treat cases the same, it's a worthy attempt, but you have to have respect and deference to the court, who's the only one that's going to be there to hear both sides of the evidence from obviously the prosecution and from the defense. But bail settings have to be highly individualized as well. And I resent the fact that in justice court we have these standard bail schedules. Now those work on a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday when the lawyer's not around and the judge is not around and someone can't afford to miss work on Monday, and maybe they have to post the $5,000 or the $10,000 or the $20,000 bail, and that they can't wait for a judge Monday morning to address that issue. But again, it goes back to justice delayed is justice denied. You
Exactly.
see it at every stage of the proceedings, from the initial arrest to a gentleman like you have sitting almost 2 years for his day in court.
And when I went to, I interviewed him in the jail, a branch of the state prison where he's being kept, and just talking to us in a room with bare walls and a little table like this, he had to be chained to the table with ankle restraints. And I'm
Pretty dehumanizing, right?
It is totally now I've got a minute here. I think I've got about 6 minutes. So I'm gonna pin our judge down here to my pet peeve in the courts. The district court, our DA chose, which apparently he can do, to direct all murder cases to prosecutors that worked for him and that are now judges. I didn't become judges for murder cases, but they're already there. But now all murder cases are directed to an individual who is a ex-prosecutor for Clark County. It seems to me the luck of the draw when you pick a judge, the judge is normally assigned at random, and obviously the DA can do this because he did it, and it's still going. But it seems to automatically violate this appearance of impropriety because you got a prosecutor who is an ex-employee of the judge, and they know each other on a personal basis and so forth. You're never going to get lucky if you're involved in a violent crime of getting a ex-defense lawyer sitting on your case.
Look,
if we did that from the defense side, it would be judge shopping. We're going to go get the judge we want, and the DA is judge shopping for the prosecution.
Yeah, so Bob, you're raising a lot of interesting issues. I mean, number one, the district attorney has enormous power, and they should, and they do. But it's a weighty responsibility. And my understanding is the effort to create what I will just call specialty courts that can hear murder cases. This was Mr. Wolfson actually being responsive to the concerns of the community in expediting the number of judges that perhaps maybe had more training or more experience, and perhaps those that are invoking speedy trial rights can get their cases heard earlier. Now, the decision as to who those judges are, I'm assuming that was made by the chief judge of the 8th Judicial District Court, but I don't know that for a fact. It would surprise me if that wasn't the case. And oftentimes those assignments are rotated. But again, we've talked about this before. There's avoiding impropriety. There's avoiding the appearance of impropriety, and to the extent that all of us can, we should do both.
Yeah, it just seems that if the defense bar was able to do the same thing, and every case that we want to will be tried before a judge who was a former primarily defense attorney, you'd just from training and background, he's seen his clients run into the ground and this and that. It just appears to be way off base. I'm not going to get myself elected. Wolfson and I are not close personal friends, as you might imagine, but the people waiting for trial, I really believe in my heart of hearts that judges should be picked at random rather than by whose team they used to be on. Yeah. It's just...
and again, and I'm not suggesting you're actually correct in the respect that he
actually did that on his own.
Well, my understanding normally is that chief judges are the ones that make the assignments. Some judges, due to funding from the legislature, are entirely civil. Right. Some are split tracks where they do criminal and civil. Usually those assignments, certainly in justice court, the chief judge decides who's going to serve in what departments for that coming year. I do think, and my experience here in Nevada is that whether it's a defense lawyer or whether it's a prosecutor, most try their best to wear that impartial hat. But again, it's not easy for all of us. Every one of us has an incumbent responsibility to put on that neutral hat, to try and to the extent we can eliminate our biases, our prejudices. During my judicial campaign, I'm often asked all the time what political affiliation I am. I'm asked how I feel about abortion. I'm asked about how I feel about the death penalty. And I'm very careful on social media and in public appearances to make it crystal clear that these are nonpartisan races. The legislature has decided in its wisdom that judicial races and education races are actually more important than all the others. And it goes to the heart of what you're talking about. It's the appearance of impropriety. We do not want judges to be affiliated as Democrats, as Republicans. We want them to have open minds. We want people to look at the black, the white, the rich, the poor, the disabled, the healthy, to the extent that you can as a human being, to filter out all of those things so that you can deliver justice for all. And it's the best thing that you can do, but it's not always a satisfactory response to those that I engage with on Facebook, but I hope they respect the fact that these are nonpartisan in nature.
The difficulty in the people have in understanding this And when I was working as a bailiff for 20-some years, I'll throw that in,
That's it?
I had numerous people that were defendants, and they would have a public defender or they'd have a private attorney that was appointed because they didn't have a public defender and he was standing in the courtroom at the wrong time, and the judge went, "You!"
Right. Yeah, that used to
Talk
be
to him.
The way it was in the old days.
And,
Some say the good old days.
But then when the hearing was over and the guy was, being sent back to trial, because we did prelims mostly in Boulder, and then the defendant would see the prosecutor and the defense attorney go, "Hey, I'll see you for lunch afterwards. I'm going to be at so-and-so. We're supposed to play golf next week," and so forth. And they immediately take that to be that their attorney isn't actually on their side because he's buddies with the other side. Yeah. And why wouldn't they think that? And they're not. Most attorneys are incredibly independent. Obviously, they know the guy on the other bench in court. If they've been at it any amount of time, they know each other personally and so forth and so on. But when they fight for their client, that's what they do.
Yeah, look, and that's that's being professional. And look, Nevada's it's getting larger, but certainly in the days that you talk about, everybody knew everybody, and reputation mattered. Your word mattered. It still matters today. Those things, perhaps not the same way they once did, because we live in such a larger society where you don't have the same frequency of cases.
Now
and
there's 25,000 lawyers in town.
Well, 25,000 too many. I think there's actually about 10,000 in southern Nevada and about 5,000 in northern Nevada. But again, you raised an interesting question, because as I come close to the primary election on June 12th, and certainly taking the bench in January, if fortunate enough to be elected, it's the propriety of judges having relationships now with folks that that he used to practice with. And so I'm going to try and go out of my way again to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Well, in some ways, you have to take a back seat, and I'm going to be very, very active in the community and in the causes that I believe in, drug court, mental health issues, things like that, because there are so many folks in justice court.
Having been a regent, and you get an ex-regent in chains for doing something, stealing money from the college, are you going to be the judge on that case?
Yeah, and
you almost can't.
No, that's right.
I mean, it's just
that's right. And there's times when you recuse yourselves and when it's appropriate.
We're going to have to end here because we're out of time. I just thank you so much for appearing on Fired Up.
Thanks for having me, and
it's really cool.
I'll come back anytime.
We are, as I started to mention earlier, our website is up, www.firedupwithboberwin.com. Please share the broadcast or friend us on Facebook or whatever. If we're not running commercials in this show, we usually do. Capitalism wins every time. Please support our sponsors when you see them. The audio portion again is on the Nevada Talk Network, and we'll be back next Tuesday with another show with a candidate for U.S. Congress who is coming in to talk to us about federal gun laws that are coming down the pike. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next week.